Hello, Lions fans, and welcome back to another episode of Believe in Lions podcast. I am Brandon Brown, joined as always by Glover Quin. And man, oh man, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what the tone was going to be like this one for a minute, Glover. It was looking a little. We talked about this with you. You played 4 years with Houston right out of college, then 6 years with the Lions. You still live in Houston. You do a lot of stuff with the Texans organization. You were in the house for the game. So we talked about this last week. You were kind of being pulled in both directions. You know people in both places. You've got an affinity for both. So you were in like a unique perspective. But me as a diehard born and bred Lions fan hosting a Lions podcast, I'm thinking, man, we're going to have to do a podcast after a loss for the first time in a long time. But the Lions just wouldn't go away. They do end up getting a 3-point win, 26-23. After a walk-off 52-yard field goal by Jake Bates. That dude has proved to be worth his weight in gold. He hit a 58-yarder earlier in the game. And, I mean, just a crazy game for a lot of reasons. Before we get into the details and the specifics of the actual game, go back to Sunday night. You're there. You're in the house. You're a former Texan. You're a former Lion. The Lions are kind of getting boat raced a little bit, and then they come charging all the way back and win in spectacular fashion at the end. What was it like, start to finish?
Man, it was actually crazy. I'm just gonna be completely honest with you. It was crazy. It was a crazy atmosphere. The Lions fans showed up. Mm-hmm. The Texans fans showed up. The tailgate was insane. I kind of walked through the tailgate area. I saw Lions fans, Texans fans. And like you said, I do work for the Texans. So I had on Texans hat, Texans legend shirt. So it was a little weird when I come across some Lions fans. They're like, "Hold on, bro." And I was like, "Hey, man, I had to." They was like, "Oh, okay, I get it." So it was cool, man. It was all love from everybody. And then you get to the game, and like I said, for me, I'm trying to look at it from just enjoying the game standpoint, but also from since I do the podcast on the Lines, I'm looking at it from a analytical standpoint.
Sure.
These are things that we need to talk about, right? And so as I'm sitting there and the Lions come out, they start out slow. The Texans came out fired up in the battle red uniforms. It brought me back to my days when we were playing in the battle red and how tough it was to win in that stadium, when we were in the battle red. I thought back to the days playing Baltimore and just different games. And it was like, okay, the Lions, are starting out slow. The Texans have came out on fire defensively. In the first half, you see Jared Goff turning the ball over, and you're like, wow, okay, this is not looking good. But you're also looking at the Texans and like those field goals are probably going to come back to hunt you guys because you got to put the ball in the end zone against the Lions and score points because getting three once they start getting seven, it's a different ball game, right? And so you just kind of watch it and it's kind of like, wow, okay, is this going to be, like you were saying, is this going to be the game that the Lions lose? And we're talking about an undermanned Texan team beating the Lions on the road, right? And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting there and it's right before the half and I'm like, okay, this is a big swing right here because the Texans get the ball back after half. And they punted, they had the Lions backed up. They stopped them. The Lions punted, and then the Texans went down. They got the touchdown to Mechie right before the half, and I was like, wow, okay. Now they finna get the ball back right after half. And then the first play after half was like interception. Okay. Ball game changed right there, right? You went interception. Not only was it interception, it was like, okay, you kick it, they touch back. Well, now you get an interception. Now you're on the 30-yard line, 35, right? So you're already in striking distance. You've went into halftime talking about coming out, making the play, and then Carlton Davis makes a big play and catch an interception. And that was the start of the downhill trend for the Texans. I think C.J. Stroud threw 2 interceptions that game. I think he threw another one. He had a touchdown pass that Carlton Davis ended up coming to make another play. The guy was wide open for a while, and then you throw a back shoulder corner route when you should have just thrown him all the way to the back of the end zone and just let him run get it. You gave Carlton Davis an opportunity to come back and make a play, and he did that. And so when you look at it from an analytical standpoint, the Texans played well in the first half, but they didn't make enough plays to win the game. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the Lions didn't play great in the first half. Jared Goff played awful, right? Mm-hmm. He had more interceptions than I've seen him have, right? But those interceptions, from a standpoint of field position, a couple of them were backed up, so the Texans didn't get great field position off of those interceptions. Mm-hmm. And the defense was able to keep the Texans at bay and hold them to field goals and give the Lions offense a chance to catch up. And that's really what happened. They shut the Texans out in the second half. They didn't score any points. They didn't even get a field goal. The one field goal they attempted was a long field goal. He missed it. And once he missed that field goal and they got the ball at 50-yard line, right now, all right, this is how it's going to end. And so the Lions made enough plays in the end to win the game. And that's what championship caliber teams do. I'm sitting there the whole time thinking of the storylines, right? How can the Lions win after Jared Goff threw 5 interceptions, right? How can they win? But they found a way to win. And that's what you see when you have championship caliber teams. They find ways to win. Now, that's scary in a sense, because you think if the Texans, if they had a Nico Collins, if they had, a Stephon Diggs, could they have overcame those 5 turnovers with a little more offensive firepower? Would have been tougher, right? Mm-hmm. But that wasn't the situation that they had in week 10. They had the situation where the Texans did not have those guys, and they found a way to win. So that just boosts the confidence of the Lions. But they do have to look in the mirror and say, hey, we can't win in the playoffs like this. We can't play like that. Jared Goff has to be better. We know that, but he's been pretty consistent. That's the law of averages of football. You're going to have a bad game here. You can't go. If I was Jared Goff, I wouldn't want to go 18 games and not have a bad game, because it's going to happen at some point, and I wouldn't want that to be in the playoffs, right? Let me get one of these bad games out of my system now. Let me get another one out probably week 17, and then let me be freshly ready to go on the road in the playoffs. So I thought the Lions did enough to show that they are who we thought they are. Mm-hmm. They are a championship caliber team to be able to go on the road and win a game where Jared Goff throws 5 interceptions. And the Texans, they showed that, hey, you can play with some of these good teams, but you got to get a little more offensive firepower. You got to get a little more, from the O-line. The Lions D-line controlled the run game. Joe Mixon only had probably 45 yards, 25 carries. So they controlled the run game, and they made it tough on them in the second half, and they couldn't score, and that proved to be why the Lions were able to come back and get the win.
Man, it's just this game was just jam-packed with so many different, like you said, what storyline can I go with? You could pick any number of them. It's obviously depending on whether you're covering it from a Lions standpoint or a Texan standpoint, that sends you in several different directions. But I mean, in smaller ones too. You mentioned John Mechie, his first career touchdown ever after everything he's been. When they are battered and bruised in the wide receiver room, that kid played a hell of a game, and he was a big reason why the Texans were in that game and dominating in the first half. You talk about Jared Goff, the worst game of his career, bar none. 5 picks in a game. Somehow the Lions still get a chance to win. I don't know if you saw this or not. It was on the broadcast at the end. I didn't see it because I was getting ready to leave. I was at a buddy's place watching it. Shout out to my dad for pointing it out. The first time a team in the NFL has won a game when throwing 5 interceptions since 1970. It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. The odds of winning a game when you throw 1 interception decreases a lot, right? When you throw 2, it goes down even more. When it goes to 5, it's nearly impossible to win a game when you throw 5 interceptions. Nearly impossible. So I don't know if that's a good thing for the Lions that they did it, or an awful thing for the Texans that they allowed it. You know what I'm saying? So it's just one of those things. And, depending on what side you're on, hey, you're looking at it like the Lions did something great, right? But like I say, as a player, as an organization, you do have to look in the mirror behind the fluff. You're happy that you got to win, right? It's always easier to make corrections after you win. It's worse after you lose. So you won the game. That's great. But we have to be realistic and know you can't continue to win like that. Jared Goff can't turn the ball over like that. But you take the good out of it. Nobody folded. Nobody, panicked. We just stayed the course, and we found a way to win the game.
Like I said, I mean, you said nearly impossible. I mean, that virtually is impossible. If it takes 50 years for something to happen, that's impossible. It just doesn't happen. Again, the shutout in the second half. Again, depending on which sideline you're standing on, that's a completely different story. How is Houston sitting over there thinking, how did we not score a dang point in the second half? And the Lions are sitting there like, man, we really bowed up when we had to. Offense wasn't really working. Thankfully, Jake Bates was able to put a couple field goals through, but the defense really stepped up and kept them out of the end zone. I mean, again, just the back and forth. And, I think you said it last week that Houston was your Super Bowl pick, right? That was your from the AFC. It was, you had Lions, Texans.
I had Lions, Texans in the Super Bowl.
I mean, the way they played last night, down 3 of their biggest playmakers, 2 on offense, 1 on defense, and Will Anderson, that looked like a deep run playoff team. I mean, C.J. Stroud was accurate. The offensive line did a good enough job protecting him, and again, just it came down to the wire, and it is what it is. Let's talk about Jared Goff for a minute. Obviously, the focus is on the fact that he threw 5 picks. He hadn't thrown 5 picks all season to this point, and he did it last night Sunday night in one game. 15 of 30, that 30 number, I was thinking about you the whole time because I remember you've hit on this point a lot. When the Lions throw the ball too much, that's the only time they've lost this year was against Tampa when they threw it 55 times. Jared Goff is usually somewhere in the 18 to 25 range. He got up to 30. 5 of them went to the other team. He still did throw for 240 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had been talked about as probably the leading candidate for MVP. First, real quick, what does this do for his MVP talks, having such a clunker of a game like that, even though they still did win? And just how do you go from what he's been doing, where he was literally not throwing incompletions, to just having such an off night? I mean, they're showing some of these plays where it's like he's almost like he's playing 500. Like he just throws it up, not under pressure, pocket's fine, and you're like, Jared, like where is this coming from, man? Like you've been so on point for so many weeks in a row.
Right. I mean, I think it hurts him in the MVP standings based off of the fact that with the Detroit Lions, they're going to always try to find ways to discredit, right? They're going to always try to find ways to discredit the Lions. I've been a part of that and understood that, right? And not to talk about myself, but 2017, I probably had a better season than I had in 2014. I just led the league in 2014 in interceptions. 2017, I didn't lead the league, but from a turnover playing standpoint, probably had a better season, but I was an alternate for the Pro Bowl. And so I feel like Detroit always gets the short end of the stick, and they're changing that, but the way they're playing nationally and people giving them a little more credit. But I think when you look at the MVP race, it's going to be very difficult for somebody from Detroit Lions to win the MVP race just based off of the perception. But then when Jared Goff plays a game like that and they still find a way to win, they're going to discredit Jared Goff and say the team is really good. There's just a really good team that they can win despite Jared Goff. If Jared Goff didn't play, if Herndon Hooker was the quarterback, they still can win because the team is great. Dan Campbell has been great. Ben Johnson is a great play caller. That is why they're winning. They're not going to say they're winning because of Jared Goff. They're going to say that Jared Goff is experiencing great success because of the system that he's in, the people that are around him, and even when he threw 5 interceptions, they still can find a way to win the game. So I think if you're looking at a Kansas City team, they probably feel like if Patrick Mahomes throws 5 interceptions, I don't know if they win that game. It's only happened one time in 50 years.
Yeah.
You see, if Lamar Jackson throws 5 interceptions, I don't think they win that game, right? Yeah. If any of those guys throw, I don't think they win that game. The Lions found a way to win it, and not just against any team, a playoff team in the Houston Texans. Yes, they're a little on demand, but they're still a good football team.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe what I was watching at times. And they're down 23-7 at the half, and you're just like, man, like, they were on such a good run, and they had a chance on national TV again. Like you said, they are changing that perception a little bit. They're 8-1, well, 7-1 coming into that game. They had beaten Minnesota when they were undefeated. They only lost was several, over a month ago. Like, people are really starting to pay attention to the Lions. National pundits are talking about them as the best team in the NFC. And then it looked like that in the first half. You're like, man, it's almost like all that work had been unraveled a little bit. But no, they found a way to get it done. Running game was kind of so. 71 yards for Gibbs, 32 for David Montgomery, and a touchdown. Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown were both pretty solid, over 60 yards receiving and a touchdown apiece. But really, I do think that the story in this game was certainly Jake Bates, the special teams, and the defense. Brian Branch, a.k.a. Glover Quin 2.0. That's what I'm going to start calling him, I think. Just all over the field. He had 10 tackles. He seems to make a play or two every single game. And then Carlton Davis, you already mentioned him. That second pick that he had, I think it was the second one. Yeah. They freeze framed the receiver, and there wasn't anybody within 20 yards of him.
That's
and
what
probably it falls on CJ Stroud for putting the ball in the wrong spot. But give a ton of credit to Carlton Davis for not giving up on the play, getting on his horse, getting all the way back over there and making a play. Tough catch in the end zone, or right by the end zone, wherever he ended up landing. And he ended up having 2 interceptions in the game. So he said something after the game that really reminded me of something that you said back several episodes ago, where he just had a feeling like, I just got to make a play. I don't know how, I don't know when, I don't know where, but he had a feeling that in his own personal individual actions, he had to go make a play, and he did that. Is that something, because you said something very similar to that to me before, and I found it really interesting. Is that something real? Like, can you really feel it? Or is it just like, is it better in, hindsight? Like, I knew I needed to make a play after I made it. But like, I just thought that was very interesting because it sounded almost identical to what you said. How do you know when that's coming about?
Well, you don't necessarily know when it's coming, but telling yourself that you need to go and make a play just puts you in a different mindset, because like you said, they freeze framed it, right? Nobody was in 20 yards. That's a hustle play. Like, yes. If he didn't have it on his mind that I need to go and make a play, he's probably not running as hard. So then that's a touchdown and you miss an opportunity. But the fact that he knows I need to go make a play, he sees the guy open, so he just starts to run as fast as he could to just try to get there. That just shows a lot of pride and what you're doing defensively. Shows a lot of grit. That's one thing that they talk about in that organization. And so that's what happens. And sometimes you get rewarded for doing things the right way. And that's literally what happened right there. But you got to kind of will those things. You got to go in there feeling like, I'm going to make a play. You can't tell yourself, oh, I hope I make a play. No, I'm going to go and make a play. I'm going to find a way to get the ball out, punch the ball out, rip it out, catch it when they throw it, tip it. So my team, something has to happen, and I'm going to try to force it to happen. And he did that. And so, yeah, you come out of the game with 2 interceptions. But something that you said, not to change it off of the defense, but going back what you said earlier about the run game, David Montgomery only had, 30-something yards?
32.
And you said, I remember it caught my attention at the very beginning of the game that they started Jahmyr Gibbs at the running back. David Montgomery did not start at the running back. Jahmyr started the first couple of plays, and then David came in the second possession. And if you look at all the games, David Montgomery generally starts and gets them rolling. Then Jahmyr comes in and changes the pace. They started with Jahmyr this game. Then David Montgomery never really got in the rhythm, and the run game struggled. Jared Goff throws 5 interceptions. So we got to keep an eye on that. Got to keep an eye on that. But we could get back to the defense.
Yeah, I mean, no, absolutely. I mean, that is noteworthy. And I think the announcers even said, like, oh, it's Gibbs getting the first carry of the night. And typically that's not how it went. Is that Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell getting out of their comfort zone a little bit, trying to catch Houston off guard? Is David Montgomery maybe working with a slightly sore ankle? I mean, we don't know. I mean, the NFL is usually pretty transparent about injury reports and stuff like that. But why would they do that? Why do you think they would go away from a formula that seemed to be unstoppable over the last 5-6 weeks?
I don't know. I have no idea why they would do that. But like I said, the 2 times that they've done it different, Tampa in Houston. Tampa had full force offensively. They had Godwin. They had Mike Evans. They were able to score points.
Yep.
The Texans were undermanned from a wide receiver standpoint. They were able to get field goals. So it gave the Texans a chance to come back. They tried to come back on Tampa. They just didn't have enough firepower and time to come back on Tampa. Texans, they did. But the game plan for both were similar, and we've seen the struggle. So that's going to be the thing. Like I said, when you start talking about the MVP race and things like that, that's going to be what they look at. When Jared Goff threw the ball 50-something times in Tampa, they lose.
Mm-hmm.
He throws 5 interceptions. They struggle. They find a way to win. Like, is it really about Jared Goff, or is it really about the run game, the O-line, and the pieces that are around them making the train go? Don't want to take anything away from Jared Goff. He's been playing phenomenal. But I think that's what's going to hurt when you start looking at the MVP. And I'm sure Jared Goff would say, I don't really care about the MVP. I want to get a chance to get to the Super Bowl and win it. That'll be the biggest thing, get a Super Bowl MVP. But that's what I think will hurt them. But it's just something that we got to look at going forward. That those first couple series of a game, if they're not establishing the run game, let's see how the offense plays. Let's see how they score and how they move the ball. Very interesting to track.
And yeah, I mean, it is. That's interesting that you pointed that out. I guess again, the announcers pointed it out. And it's something you've been harping on all year. That one game that they got away from it was an L, and this one almost was too. But they were resilient enough and got the 3-point win at the last as time expired. Last thing I wanted to talk about before we just mentioned Jacksonville. Again, they're playing Jacksonville next week. Everybody, the Lions are going to be big time favorites in that one coming back home. Jacksonville's 2-5. They did just get a decent little win over New England, scored some points. Trevor Lawrence looked like he was playing a little bit better, but that should be a pretty easy win for Detroit. We'll talk about that one just for a second at the very end. But the last little topic I wanted to touch on here is Zadarius Smith didn't play. They talked to him after the game. He gave a ton of love to Dan Campbell for giving him the time off, letting him go check on his house in Florida. He mentioned something about how they were dealing with some bad weather down there, and he wanted to go check out some stuff and just make sure things were good. He wasn't going to get a bye because of just the way that the schedule had worked out with his previous team and the Lions schedule and everything like that. So he wanted to play. The fans wanted him to play. We all wanted to see him in there, but Dan Campbell sat him down, had a talk with him. They ultimately said it was best for him to sit out. So he did that. So he should be full and ready to go for Jacksonville. But he was shown multiple times on the sidelines coaching up guys. He talked about it after the game, things he was seeing, things he was telling the other guys to do. I just, again, that's a pretty unique situation to get traded midseason like that, have your bye schedule kind of be off and not be able to play even though you are able to play. I just wondered what you took from that, kind of how he conducted himself. I know it was just snapshots. We only saw a couple seconds of footage of him on the sidelines and then talking after the game. But that's the first time I've ever really heard him talk about coming to the Lions, what it was going to be like, what he liked about everything. And I know last time we talked about it, you were pretty complimentary about him as a pro and how he's been able to handle himself throughout the last 10 years. Just thoughts on what you saw from him in that little bit of a TV time and what it should mean moving forward.
Well, I mean, I think the first thing you got to think about is, I mean, he's a rejuvenated, happy
He
guy.
seemed so happy, didn't he?
Right. I mean, you go from Cleveland to Super Bowl legitimate contender, right? Mm-hmm. So he's definitely happy and rejuvenated, right? But I saw it earlier in the week, right? You remember we talked last week, and I was like, Zadarius Smith was in the building probably Tuesday, right? Like they're getting him ready. And then I look up and I see it might have been like Thursday or something like that. That it was like Zadarius Smith just arrived to Detroit. And I'm like, hold on, he just got there? Like he should have been there like 2 days ago. You know what I'm saying? But hearing him talk and say, hey, I didn't get a bye. And, Dan Campbell gave me a couple of days to just go home, check some stuff out of my house from her. So that let me know right then that's why he arrived late to Detroit, and he was never in the plans to play. Even though he wanted to play, But from Dan Campbell's standpoint, that's a great job to realize, hey, he's a 10-year guy. He's a little older, didn't get a bye week, so we're going to give him a bye week. Yeah, we do need you this game, but we're looking at the bigger picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at the bigger picture. That we want you to be healthy. We want you to be rested. Give you a little more time to get acclimated to what we're doing, so that when you come out, against Jacksonville, hopefully we can really dominate these guys and give you more time to get acclimated to us and what we're doing. And we're going to need you down the stretch when we're playing against the good teams in the playoffs and towards the end of the season when we're doing playoff season. We got Green Bay again. We're going to have Minnesota again. Those are going to be two important games that they got to have. And so I think Dan Campbell, looking at the big picture, made a great call. Give him some time off. Let him go. It's a lot going on right now. Let him go home, get a little break, check on some things. And then once you come back, you can be locked in.
It just – you could see it on his face, man. You could feel the energy. You could feel the happiness. You could feel like – and he said it too. He's like, yeah, I wanted to play, but I love Coach actually for kind of letting me settle down a little bit, get my bearings, realize what was important right now this week. And like you said, moving forward, he'll be good to go. I mean, and again, all of this, easier to fix mistakes, easier to talk to Jared Goff about the 5 picks, easier to ease Zadarius Smith into things off a win. Even though it wasn't pretty, man, you'll take them every week in the NFL if they end with you having more points than the other team. So Detroit, man, 8-1, first time since 1954, man. A couple things that haven't happened in forever happened in this game. Lions sitting at 8-1, by far the best team in the NFC. Damn, Kansas City just keeps winning too. I just can't wait for a week we can say the Lions got the best record in the NFL, but Mahomes just won't let it happen just yet. But there you have it. He's Glover Quin. I'm Brandon Brown. Lions 8-1, getting ready to take on Jacksonville, I believe 2-5, if I'm not mistaken. As they get ready to come to Detroit. Lions looking to move to 9-1 after a nail biter in Houston. Glover, thanks a lot.
Thank you.